So this video is going to look at how culture affects perception. Now the first thing we've got to do is define what is meant by perceptual set, because it's a key word on the specification. Now this is our tendency to notice certain aspects of the environment while ignoring others. So basically it's we see what we want to see, or we hear what we want to see in different situations. And it can be infected by loads of different things, but this particular video is going to look at how culture affects our perceptual set. So before we start, we've got to define what culture is. And culture is the beliefs and the expectations that surround us. Now, sometimes we're not even aware of the culture we're living in until we experience a different one. So when you go on holiday, you realize that people behave differently, they act differently, they eat differently. And we start to experience what different cultures are like. And perceptual set is affected by our culture. What we're used to, what we're familiar with, determines how we interpret things and what we pick up in our environment. But also, our culture influences things such as our upbringing, our experiences, and ultimately influences how we make sense of the world around us. So the study we're going to look at to help us understand how culture affects perception is Hudson's study. And what Hudson wanted to find out was whether people in different cultures interpret information in pictures differently. So a 2D picture, we can still see depth in a 2D picture. If we think about all the things we've learned previously in this topic, like height in plane, relative size, occlusion, we use those depth cues to help us work out depth in an image. Now, Hudson wondered whether people from different cultures use depth cues differently. And if they do, if each culture uses depth cues differently, then it shows us depth cues must be something that we learn. It's not something that we're born with. So here's how they conducted the study. They showed this drawing to schooled and unschooled native black South Africans, and also schooled and unschooled white South Africans. And they asked them 3 different questions. What do you see? What is the man doing? And also, which is nearer to the man, the elephant or the antelope? So, these were the results. Using depth cues, height in plane, relative size, we can work out that the antelope is nearer to the man. But many of the participants in this study replied the elephant was nearer. So both the black and the white school children were more likely to perceive depth. They could tell that the antelope was closer. But the white school participants were far more likely to perceive depth than the black school participants. So a few findings of the study there. So now what does this actually mean? Well, it suggests that cultural difference affect our perceptual set, as different groups perceive depth differently. So one cultural difference was the amount of schooling. So it might be that the amount of schooling you have exposes you to more 2D drawings, and you learn to interpret those while you're at school. Another cultural difference is race. If you think 1960 in Africa, when this study was actually conducted in South Africa, white people had far more access to books, magazines. They would have seen far more 2D drawings. And again, they would have learned to interpret them. But it supports Gregory's theory that some aspects of perception are learned. Because the different groups all use these depth cues differently, it suggests that it's not something we're born with. So in summary, our culture influences our upbringing, our experiences, and also how we make sense of the world around us.